Welcome back, my students, to another episode of Comet Class. And in today's lesson, guys, we're going to be looking at Rick Remender and Wes Craig's Deadly Class, Volume 6. This is not the end. And yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into today's lesson. Let's go. So the book pretty much starts off with Saya with her mother, and if you remember how the last volume left off was that Saya had gotten captured by her brother's clan, basically, to take her back home. And yeah, so basically we get to see her talking to her mother at this point, and it's really cool. We also get a little bit of flashback showing Saya's relationship with her father, and the fact that because she was female, she was never considered to be the successor to her father's clan, and she kind of learned how the business works at a very young age. And we get to see Saya's brother Kenji, basically his relationship with their father, and not being such a great one. And he's actually, kind of shamed and told that he's a failure by his father and one of his co-workers, another boss of, I guess, a Yakuza gang or something like that. And yeah, so he's pretty mad. And Saya basically arrives. Well, she talks to him, basically trying to get him to vouch for being a good successor, or at least being able to join the clan to be able to fight with them. But Kenji doesn't, agree to that at all. Now we get to see that Kenji goes to this type of bar and is kind of made fun of by the other people in different clans, basically telling him that he himself is not worthy of being the successor to his father's clan, and that he's kind of like a poor person. And one thing you need to understand is that when we look at Kenji's character, it's very clear that Kenji's father had became a boss of a gang in order to protect the neighborhood that they live in, basically to scare off other people and keep the drugs, the prostitution, and stuff like that out of his neighborhood. Now, the thing is, with Kenji, he starts learning that other people are providing the people that want these things with those services, and he wants to, get into that and basically forget about protecting people, instead making themselves rich, because he can't stand, doing all this for not that much money. And yeah, it's pretty, messed up, but that's how Kenji wants to live his life. So he basically gets mad, and we get to see that Saya shows up and basically affronts him pretty much in front of all his friends. And this gets Kenji really mad, and the people are actually impressed with Saya being able to get money, from doing some type of selling at the school that she's going to at this point in time. And eventually they asked her to join their clan, pretty much, their little group. And this is where we get the origin of Saya's tattoos that we've seen on her since the first volume. So I think that's pretty interesting, how even the tattoos had a story to them. It really shows that Rick Remender takes these things pretty seriously, and even the little details matter in this story. Now, Kenji overhears one of his friends, the son of the guy that had made fun of him in front of his father, basically saying that if Saya actually, would like to join him whenever he takes over his father's, clan, that he might want to work with Saya and offer her a spot in their, their family, because her own family won't accept her because she's a female. So Kenji overhears this, and he goes and he kills the father of this guy, pretty much, the guy that had made fun of him. And he basically tries to pin the blame on Saya by saying that she's the one that killed the dude, and her mother basically sees her with the blade and assumes the worst. So Saya makes a getaway, and we get to skip later on into where Kenji's actually in a meeting, basically talking to his friend about his father's death. And basically we're getting into a pretty serious situation where they're asking for blood because that was his father. So eventually Saya shows up and basically cuts off two of her fingers to kind of prove herself that she's not guilty of killing this guy's father. But her father basically tells her that he knows that one of his kids basically, murdered this dude, saying that it's Kenji for sure, because it's not Saya. And he basically takes on the burden of letting himself die That way the people of his neighborhood will stay safe. And yeah, so basically her father dies, basically sacrifices himself. And Saya like loses it when Kenji is accepted as, the person that's gonna overtake the clan, and she goes and starts killing the friend and his people for killing her father. And she almost kills Kenji as well, and does promises to kill him in the future. Now we get to see that Saya's mom basically is talking to her, and she puts some type of medicine to kind of like knock out Saya. She has her like hooked up to some type of IV, and yeah, it's pretty messed up. Now we get to skip to seeing Marcus, because Marcus had kind of revealed to be alive in the last volume, and Marcus is hallucinating Willie. Because if you remember, before Willie had died, in those final moments, he had talked about going with Marcus to Mexico to start a new life. So we're seeing that Marcus, being high on drugs, basically starts hallucinating Willie, which is, crazy. And eventually, Maria shows up and basically tells Marcus that he's kind of losing his mind, smoking too much weed. And eventually they just talk about, living their life here, and how things are starting to get stale and boring because they really just have each other now. Now we get to see that, Helmet basically goes up to Guan and asks him, like, what exactly happened with Saya. Because there's just too much information that had gotten out, and he must have told somebody. So actually, one of Helmet's friends basically says that he had actually told Saya where they were going to be at and where they got ambushed, and they get into a type of altercation, and eventually Master Lin calls all three of them to come to his office. Now Master Lin talks to all of them and basically gives them a question, and says that they must answer it, saying where is Saya. When none of them give up Saya's location, Master Lin just says that it's fine and that they are dismissed, which was really cool. Now we get to look at Shabnam and the rest of the gang, pretty much his gang, and they basically are just doing some type of shooting practice, getting better at using firearms. And this is where we get some interactions between the members, and Shabnam actually points a gun at one of his own members, the guy that killed his boyfriend, and it's pretty messed up. The Shabnam gets some type of rush by seeing this dude scared. It's pretty, it's pretty beta, to be honest, because we know Shabnam doesn't have it in him to actually kill somebody. But we get this moment, and we also get to see that Brandy is talking to Petra. Basically, they get into a fight because, Petra is being attacked by Brandy, saying that her vote doesn't matter in their group because she's kind of unstable because of what she did with Billy and her backstory with her father and mother, basically, but especially her father and what he did to her. If you remember, that backstory was pretty messed up. And yeah, so they basically had their stuff. And I'm not sure if you're going to remember this later on, but she actually, sprays something into Brandy's face, and this is going to come back later on in the volume, so keep that in mind. Now, after this, we get to see that Guan is basically looking into, I guess, Saya's room, or at least the room that she had before she was kidnapped, and he finds the journal, basically, or her journal, where she keeps her stuff, that she talks about her secret things, and he learns about Marcus and Maria in Mexico. So that's going to be a major plot point later on in the volume as well. So after this, we get to see that Saya's mom basically wakes up Saya and basically tells her that she made a big mistake in thinking that Kenji would kind of forgive her, I guess, or not be that harsh in the punishment. So she doesn't want Saya to die, so she basically tries to escape with Saya. And this is where Kenji is waiting down at the stairs. Basically attacks his mom. Now, I believe it's implied that he kills his mother, which is so dark. I mean, probably one of the darkest things we've seen in this series. I mean, Kenji is a true villain. He doesn't care. He wants this power, and he doesn't want anyone to take it away from him. He's had it for a few years, I think, at this point. Now, Kenji basically calls Guan, because if you remember, Guan in the last volume had revealed to be a traitor. And yeah, so Guan basically is talking to Kenji, and Kenji tells him that he knows a secret, that he actually got one of the other gang members, gang boss's daughter pregnant, and that he's going to kill Guan for sure, and her, the girl that he had gotten pregnant. And what had happened is that Guan had, I guess, had her get an abortion, So the baby is not a thing, but the boss will kill him and the daughter for, kind of like disgracing the entire family by doing that and not being married or something like that. So Guan basically is told by Kinji that he must go to Mexico to go get Marcus and bring him to him. So that's going to be the plot point for that character, throughout this volume. Now we get to see that Victor pits up Guan after his talk with Kinji, and Victor basically shows Guan his place. Basically, he tells him that he's going to, remember his place in this group. And he basically, smashes Guan's face into some type of mirror and just tells him that he himself knows about his secret about how he's the one that betrayed Saya, and that when that is turned into Master Lin, it will be horrible news for Guan. If you remember what happens to the Irish kid, the last volume, it probably means death or something. Now we get to see Zenzelli, which is Zenzelli is one of the more interesting new characters in the story, and her and Brandy get into a fight. And this fight, to me, was a little forced. You definitely could feel some political talk in here, but I will get to why I think this isn't as bad later on. But yeah, they basically talk about it. If you don't remember, Brandy, the first volume, was already introduced to be racist. That's her thing. She's racist, basically. So her and Zenzelli basically talk about some type of American culture, and they almost get into a knife fight. Brandy, I'm surprised, didn't try stabbing Zenzelli, which I think is showing that Brandy isn't completely evil. She's not like Victor, that probably would have killed someone if they went up to him like Zenzelli did. Even though Brandy's the one that started it, of course. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Now, after that, we get to see that Petra, after having that altercation with Brandy, basically goes back to wearing her goth look, which I think fits Petra so much better. And Petra's basically about to commit suicide when Helmet shows up and basically tells her to give it one more day and that he's going to try letting her have some fun and just don't give up on life yet. So they basically go out on a date and they do some pretty interesting things and eventually end up kissing each other in the moonlight, it seems. Now, after this whole situation, they basically all decide to go on a road trip to Mexico. And this road trip is pretty interesting because we know that the reason why Guan, even suggested this road trip is because he wants to go find Marcus and bring him back for Kinji. Now, Maria, I believe he can just kill her. He doesn't need to bring her back. But Marcus definitely needs to be brought back to prove that he's still alive. Now, the whole road trip with these characters is interesting. I think I said this in the first volume or second volume of Deadly Class, but my favorite portions of Deadly Class, have to be when these characters feel like real people. And one of the things to make a character feel real is have them just do normal human things, such as driving in a car and just hanging out. And I think that's why I really love this scene, because we get all these interactions with these characters. Helmet and Petra seem to be dating at this moment. And yeah, we also get, like I said, this is why I was saying earlier about the whole political thing wasn't as bad, is because in the first debate with Brandy and Zenzelli, they were talking about how white people were kind of like people that controlled people like slaves and that. I didn't really like that because it seemed very one-sided. But what I like about Rick Remender, even though I believe he's more of a leftist, I have to respect him for this portion, because he gives us both sides. Because in this case, now it's a person of color basically attacking a white person, saying they're all the same. Whereas Petra says that these things that he's talking about have nothing to do with her just because of her skin color. She doesn't act that way. And I thought that was really good, because at first when I was going through the book, to get the material, because I had read this like maybe a year or two ago, I had forgotten how some of this dialogue went out, but it's like I said, I was a little like it was kind of forced at the first part. But when I saw this other side, I was like, okay, it's a way to have a dialogue about the racism in the world, because now we're seeing that it's not just one race that does it, but all races, because that's what this guy's doing to Petra, basically, because she's white. He's assuming that she's a person that likes to force herself on people, basically, and force her ways on people. And that's not the case, as Petra says, that your skin color doesn't dictate who you are. And I thought that was a really good message, because even, Guan says that they're here to have a good time. They're on a road trip. They're friends. And we're going to see in a little bit that Guan actually has a talk with this guy, basically telling him that these people are good people, that you can't judge people off of their skin color or stuff that people maybe as a group had done in the past. And I think that's a really good message. So even though I thought it was a little forced at first, at the end of the day, whenever I read the entire volume, I thought the message came across way better when you read it in full. Now after that, we get to see them just hanging out, and Victor and Brandy have came to Mexico as well to take out all of Marcus's friends and basically these new characters as well. So yeah, it's going to get dark. Now, like I said, we had a talk with Guan and this guy, I forgot what his name is, a Helmet's, roommate. And basically they have this funny moment where they're just like chilling and talking to each other, just understanding each other on what it's like to be different from a lot of other people, without it being too preachy. They have this funny moment where he goes down to slight Guam, and basically someone had, taken a dump, basically, in the slide, and he tells the roommate, basically Helmet's roommate, to come face first, which was super funny. And yeah, they basically head into like a type of a motel, I believe. And this is where we get to see that they had drove in, I guess, the next day, and they had found this motel, and we get to see that Marcus actually there. Now, Marcus and Guan look at each other, and, Guan has to figure out if this is actually Marcus, and he does. But before he can attack Marcus, we get to hear that Maria basically says, oh my god, or something like that. And we get to see Marcus running, and he gets a gun out, and this is where we get to see that Maria and Petra are talking to each other. And I like how Marcus is very skeptical, and this is going to be very warranted, because for those that know what happens in the next volume, it's definitely warranted. Yeah, so Brandy basically shows us, we get to see what happened before they went to this road trip. And Brandy basically, after that altercation with Zinzelli, basically sneaked into her room, grabbed her journal or whatever, or I guess these letters that she was going to send. And it turns out that Zinzelli actually murdered her parents. She had been making letters to send to her parents that were actually dead. And yeah, it got really dark. And this is where Zinzelli basically tried escaping, but Victor got in her way and said that no one is able to leave until the thing's done or until they're happy. And this is where, the Helmet's roommate basically attacked Victor, and everyone starts fighting, and it's just awesome. So because that happened, we get to see that Petra actually got in some of her, gas or whatever, liquids, poisonous liquids, and put it on Shabnam's face. I believe it was a type of acid. So Shabnam, we have no idea how he's going to look when we see him again. But yeah, it's pretty messed up. And she was aiming for Brandy, but, this is a way, I guess, to give Shabnam a more villainous look. We'll find out in the next volume, I'm guessing. And yeah, so basically, Guan tries to sweet talk his way out of Marcus, being skeptical. It's pretty awesome to see them interact, and basically, like Marcus says, it's hard to trust anyone after what they went through at King's Dominion, and I don't blame him, because it was some messed up stuff. So Guan, Petra, Maria, Marcus, and Zelly, and Helmet and his roommate basically all have a party. Basically, they just enjoy each other. And they take acid, or they do stuff, they get high, just a bunch of things. And eventually they tell Marcus and Maria that Saya is dead, which, Marcus does not take it well. Eventually, to relieve the stress, they decide to sleep with each other. It's pretty awkward, to be honest, because, they're kind of next to each other in the two beds or something like that. And I think it's Guam who says, this is pretty weird, because he's the only one left out. And yeah, eventually Guan and Marcus actually talk after all that's over with. And Marcus basically tells Guan that he's not alone, and that, things do feel very isolating, especially for someone like Marcus that had literally no one. But Guam and him at least have each other, and they can start having a type of friendship as long as he wants it. This is where Victor basically grabs Guam when he goes out to get a soda for him and Marcus, and tells him that he's going to leave the door unlocked, basically, so that Victor can go in and kill everybody, and he's going to take the credit for it, and basically tells him to know his place. And Brandy is actually, it seems, going to be starting to date Victor, or maybe they were already dating. I have no idea. But yeah, so they basically leave Guam, and Guam's supposed to do this. Now, Guam does leave the door unlocked, and this is where we get to see that, the people from the Kuroki, I believe is the name, Kinji's people, basically, that they arrive to take on Marcus and his people, because they probably didn't care about, Guam. Basically, they didn't trust Guam to actually get the job done, which was a smart move on their part because he wasn't. And Victor and Brandy are going in as well. And Victor and Brandy go into the room and basically see that the window's open and that Guam basically told them about their plan. And yeah, they basically screwed Victor and Brandy. This is where Victor basically says that he has them, and he sees that, the Japanese, Kinji's clan, basically the Kuroki, have cornered Marcus and all of them. And this is where Marcus shows that he actually shoots Brandy, or he stabs her in the chest or the stomach, it's hard to tell. And he tells Victor that long time no see. And that's how the volume ends. Now, out of all the volumes of Deadly Class, when this volume ended, I was like, wow, what a way to end the volume. But it did feel kind of like, I don't know how you would say it, just like abrupt end, basically. I thought that it felt very weird the way it ended with him pointing a gun at Vic, but it does make me want to read the next volume, so I guess it accomplished its goal in that. And that was Deadly Class Volume 6, This Is Not the End. This video is probably not as long as the other ones, I have no idea, and this one, and that was Deadly Class, and that was Rick Remender and Wes Craig's Deadly Class Volume 6, This Is Not the End. And yeah, what a great volume. I thought that the use of characters in this volume was really well done. Overall, Deadly Class does a good job at making me care about each character. So I can't wait to see what kind of characters will probably die in the next volume. And also where the story progresses, because it does seem like this is going to be the end point for a lot of characters, or at least the end point of where the story has gone so far, and it's going to go into a whole new direction, it seems, pretty soon, because they will have to return to King's Dominion in the future, and how will that be, and how will it play out? But that's going to be all, guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. As always, be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel for comic book videos. I have a lot of new comics that I'm going to be covering on the channel, such as King in Black, that new Marvel event that came out I think it was like December of last year. I just finished last month. I've been wanting to cover that, so that will be coming once I finish the Deadly Class retrospective. And also some other stories as well, such as the Wolverine Frank Miller miniseries. I want to cover that as well. And just a bunch of stuff, like maybe some Batman comics and that. But yeah, I'm going to be doing other stuff other than just Deadly Class, guys. I'm just trying to finish the retrospective, so bear with me until I get that final Volume 9 out. But that's going to be all, guys. Until next video, God bless you. Until the next lesson, keep on reading those comments.
I am who I'm meant to be. I am who I'm meant to be. Over and out again. My future needed clarity, so I could see